You'll have probably heard the rumours and extravagant claims before that there is an active, secret underground society operating in the UK, a satanic cult. Whispers of human sacrifice, death rituals, secret gatherings and hidden agendas. But is there actually any truth to this? Do these dark satanic cults really exist in modern Britain? And if so, what do they actually look like and what do they really do? They're often dismissed as just being in the imagination of conspiracy theorists. But if this is true, then why have hundreds, thousands of people claim to have been active in satanic cults? Why are there literally hundreds of books making allegations? It's a rumour that has existed almost as long as time itself. But is it true? And so in this video, we explore a controversial and chilling question. Is there a satanic cult in the UK? To understand the present, as always, we must first delve into the past, and the UK has a long history of fascination with the occult. Going all the way back to the 15th century, society started becoming paranoid that some people were working with the devil. During the medieval period, accusations of witchcraft, dealings with the devil, and people engaging with satanic activities became rampant. This led to the infamous English witch trials, where hundreds of people, almost all women, were rounded up, accused of engaging in witchcraft, and put on trial. The witch hunts escalated under King James I, who was himself somewhat obsessed with the threat of witchcraft and sorcery. They reached their most intense phase during the English Civil War of the 1640s and the Puritan era of the 1650s. Witch hunters like Matthew Hopkins travelled around England, rounding up witches who had apparently made a pact with Satan and putting them on trial. Hopkins' methods of how to prove they were witches were nothing short of crazy. He often used techniques such as sleep deprivation to extract confessions from his victims. He would also cut the arm of the accused with a blunt knife, and if she did not bleed, she was said to be a witch. Another one of his methods was the swimming test, based on the idea that as witches had renounced their baptism, water would reject them. Suspected witches were tied to a chair and thrown into the water. All those who swam or floated were considered to be witches. Those who drowned and were killed were innocent. During this early period in our history, when the UK first became fascinated with the occult, an estimated 500 people were executed for witchcraft, mostly by hanging, but some, such as Mary Lakeland, were burned at the stake. Almost all those accused were older women, usually isolated from society and with a bad reputation. Most were accused by neighbours of acting strange or having caused injury to other people around them. Documents from this era reveal the extent of the paranoia. Thousands of people were accused, hundreds were tortured, and hundreds were executed for practicing witchcraft. Looking back at the documents of the time, there is no evidence to suggest that any of those executed had actually been witches. While this early paranoia and fear of Satan, the devil and witches dissipated by the 16th century, the idea that there is a secret, malevolent satanic group has persisted in the UK ever since. However, it wasn't until several hundred years later, in the late 20th century, when it would come to the forefront again. During the 1960s and 1970s, it was the media that started to ignite the ideas of satanic cults all over again. 3 films in particular, Rosemary's Baby in 1968, The Exorcist in 1973, and The Omen in 1976, brought the threat of the devil and satanic groups into movie theatres and people's living rooms. Across the pond in the US, fears of satanic cults began to grow further, following the murders conducted by the Manson family cult and the formation of the Church of Satan, which still operates to this day. And here in the UK, we had our own satanic church. The Process Church of Final Judgment was formed in 1966. This church fully embraced Satan, and even published an article by Charles Manson in its magazine called Death. You can find out more about this truly bizarre cult in the video I did on British cults on your screen now. Fears continued to spread, and in 1972, Mike Warnke wrote a best-selling memoir called The Satan Cellar. In this book, he claimed to have led a group of 1,500 Satanists that engaged in rape and human sacrifice before he went on to convert to Christianity. Meanwhile, writing under the name Lauren Stratford, Laurel Wilson wrote 3 books, the most infamous of which was called Satan's Underground. This book purported to tell her true story of her upbringing as a baby breeder in a satanic cult where babies were bred for sacrifice. She also claimed in the book to have first-hand knowledge of high-profile cases of alleged satanic ritual abuse. All of the claims in both Warnke's and Wilson's books were found to be fabricated and entirely false. Every investigation into these claims of satanic cults and satanic ritual abuse found they were completely unsubstantiated. However, this didn't stop it whipping up fears of satanic cults throughout society. A few years later, the hornet's nest is kicked again, when a book is published in 1980 called Michelle Remembers. Michelle Remembers was a book that relied on the discredited practice of recovered memory therapy. The book made lurid, sweeping claims that Michelle Smith had been involved in satanic ritual abuse. Throughout the book, no evidence was provided. All investigations into the book failed to corroborate any of its claims, and investigators described its content as being primarily based on elements of popular culture and fiction that were popular at the time when the book was written. And this book, and everything that came before it, led to the infamous Satanic Panic in the 1980s and 1990s, when fears of a satanic cult in Britain reached their peak. The Satanic Panic. In the 1980s and 1990s, fears of satanic cults and ritual satanic abuse spread throughout the UK. Examined by Jean Lafontaine in her 1998 book Speak the Devil, the 1980s saw the development of disturbing accounts of the ritual and satanic abuse of children appearing for the first time in mainstream British media. In the media, there were claims that children were not only being forced to watch or participate in vile and twisted acts during satanic ceremonies, but that they were also being murdered as ritual sacrifices. At one international conference in 1988, a leading figure in a children's charity expressed the opinion that at least 4,000 children were being sacrificed every year in the UK alone. It was estimated that the number of children subject to satanic abuse in the US was considerably greater. Panic spread throughout the UK, and in several Midland towns, social workers removed children from their parents' houses to protect them from alleged satanic abuse. Children came forward and provided social workers and foster parents with lurid accounts of the appalling acts that they had seen and done in the name of Satan. Adults came forward to claim that they had been ritually abused throughout their childhood. The detail of these accounts and the similarities between them suggested that not only were these accounts factual, but that there was a powerful, covert network of Satanists organising the ritual abuse of children. In Rochdale in the early 1990s, a 6-year-old boy living on an estate made claims about ghosts, being locked up and being given a drink that made him feel he could fly. This led to 15 children from the same estate being taken into care, many of them seized in dawn raids while still in their pyjamas. Months later, the same thing happened in Orkney, where 9 bewildered children were forcibly removed from their parents and flown to the mainland. Social services were concerned about apparent witchcraft ceremonies taking place in a quarry. This was a crazy time in British history, as people genuinely began to believe that there were hundreds, thousands of satanic cults in operation. But the stories were easily debunked. They were investigated, and there was no evidence, no proof to prove any of the claims. It turned out that the 6-year-old boy and his sister in Rochdale had been allowed to watch horror movies, some with satanic scenes, and then they had described that to the police. The children in the Orkney case were eventually returned home and no charges were brought. At the height of the Satanic Panic in 1989, 60 Minutes Australia aired an incredible special investigation in which they interviewed a 15-year-old girl called Theresa, and she recounted her experience of being in a satanic cult. This investigation involved allegations of horrific abuse and that babies were killed and eaten by the cult. She also described how the cult disposed of the dead bodies. These are some clips from that interview.
And us kids would be made to do things with the adults and the animals, and then a sacrifice would happen.
The sacrifice, were these animal sacrifices?
Animals and people.
During these ceremonies, was Satan, the devil, ever referred to?
He was called Lucifer.
What did they say about the devil, about Lucifer?
That killing the people made him happy.
Sacrifices to please the devil.
There was a tramp who was brought in once, and he was killed. He was cut from his throat down to his stomach, and they ate him, or bits of him.
They killed a man at a ceremony?
Yeah.
In front of you?
Yeah, in front of all of us. I've seen loads of babies killed there, just newborn babies, or aborted ones which were only small. 4-year-olds. Any age, really.
What would happen to the fetuses, the unborn babies?
They used to be taken away most of the time, and one time a baby was taken out of me and then killed in front of me because it was still alive.
And then, what would happen?
Well, after they killed it, they would eat it. But we were also made to eat it.
You were made to eat your own fetus?
Yeah. They had a tub, pretty big, I don't know. A very big tub, and they used to put the bodies and bones in there. And it used to go like, fizzy and that. And then there was nothing left. Or there didn't seem to be, but when they cleared it out, there used to be a sludge at the bottom.
A chronicle of debauchery and depravity so horrific it's hard to believe. You have to ask yourself, could Theresa be just making it up?
No. I know what's true and what's not. No, I know what I saw. No. It's no dream. It's a nightmare, but it's not one you can wake up from. It's there all the time.
This really happened? You're quite sure of that?
Yeah.
The challenge with Theresa's story is while clearly there was horrific abuse and charges were brought against certain individuals relating to this, there is no record of any police investigation or charges related to this alleged satanic abuse or a satanic cult. The claims of rituals and baby killings appear not to have stood up to any scrutiny. 60 Minutes Australia took the allegations as fact when it would appear that there is in fact no evidence to corroborate them. Again, this is not to say that Theresa was not subject to awful abuse. But the allegations of Satanism, of mass killings and baby sacrifice, do not have evidence to back them up. In 1992, Channel 4 broadcast a special investigation into satanic ritual abuse in the UK called Beyond Belief. During the documentary, over 5,000 British people attempted to call into the show to share their experience of having been involved in satanic abuse. However, despite the claims from the so-called survivors, social workers and health professionals, There was no independent corroboration of these stories. The most sophisticated technologies of forensic science found no evidence to suggest that murders were being committed in satanic rituals. Despite claims of years of abuse, adult survivors could not identify their abusers or provide any evidence. The government commissioned a full report called The Extent and Nature of Organised and Ritual Abuse. The analysis revealed that an estimated 242 cases of ritual organised abuse occurred each year. Of those 242, about 21 cases were said to involve allegations of satanic abuse. However, again, no evidence was found that the abuse of children was part of the rites directed to a satanic, magical, or religious objective. Of those 21 cases, 3 were substantiated, but of those 3, it was not found that satanic abuse had taken place. In short, the report found that while abuse was unfortunately real and common, claims of it being linked to satanic cults could not be substantiated. But that wasn't the end of it. And as ever, if you can find one expert to say one thing, you can find another to say something else. Dr. Robert Howe and Valerie Sinison were commissioned by the government in the year 2000 to explore whether satanic cults were conducting ritual satanic abuse in the UK. Yes, the government commissioned a report on it only 20 years ago. This study examined 12 claims of satanic ritual abuse to see whether there was any truth in any of them. This involved a clinical examination of the cases, including the alleged victims providing evidence, such as weapons, ceremonial clothing and items, photographic evidence of satanic emblems, and evidence of unregistered children and injuries. Of the 12 cases in the study, 6 were deemed by the police to merit further investigation. This was duly carried out, and 2 made it to court, both of which were non-Satanists. The conclusions from this study is that we are left with a substantial number of cases in which the central allegations remain neither proven nor disproved by the police. The report author, who has treated 126 ritual abuse survivors, said that in many cases children were tortured by being held underwater or made to believe they had witnessed the murder of infants as part of the satanic ritual. She said, quote, "Some children are born for the purpose of abuse and are not registered on birth certificates." She added, "The abusers use trickery to convince children they have taken part in murder. This increases the power of the abuser." Clearly, despite reports saying otherwise, there continued to be those who genuinely believed that satanic cults and satanic ritual abuse was taking place. And it was just a few years later, in 2014, that rumours that a satanic cult was operating in the heart of London burst into the public domain. It's a truly incredible story, and it's absolutely true. In the summer of 2014, in Hamstead, North London, 2 children made accusations to the police that their father was running a Satan-worshipping, child-abusing ring. They said that their father was a member of a ring of satanic abusers who killed babies and drank their blood. They said that cult members would drink the baby's blood, then dance around wearing babies' skulls and shoes made of baby skin. The children further alleged that school teachers, parents of pupils, social workers and local priests were also in the cult. In early 2015, Sabine McNeil, a 76-year-old German scientist, published the video interviews of the children making their allegations, along with a list of the names of the alleged abusers, and published them online. This quickly went viral and led to harassment, death threats and intimidation. The police investigated the claims of satanic cults by the children and found, again, they were entirely false. A police search of the local school and church for the secret rooms where children said babies were killed found that the rooms simply did not exist. None of the other children, who the 2 children had named as fellow abuse victims, made similar accusations. Some of the other sites given by the children as locations of abuse simply did not exist. And none of the Metropolitan Police officers, who the children had named as members of the cult, were found to have ever existed. Instead, it later became apparent that the children had been pressured into telling these stories of satanic abuse and satanic cults by their parents. So what we have seen is that throughout history, people have believed that there are satanic groups, cults and abusers in operation, all the way from the witch hunts in the Middle Ages to the Hamstead hoax in 2014. And all these cases have one thing in common. There has never been any evidence found that there is any truth in any of them. Indeed, all major police investigations and government reports into allegations of satanic cults and satanic abuse have found no evidence to support them. But that's not to say that a satanic cult does not exist. Not having evidence to prove something just means you can't prove it. It doesn't necessarily follow that it's not true. And think about it logically. An actual satanic cult would be operating deep underground, out of sight from everyone. And here's what's interesting. The Metropolitan Police, the police force of London, actually list satanic abuse by cults as a real concern on their website. They say, "From our experience and in consultation with communities, we know that this kind of abuse is underreported." They have even set up a task force, Project Violet, to help eradicate faith and belief-based abuse, including that committed by Satanists. Meanwhile, Rape Crisis South London, on their website, speaks about abuse where a cult may worship Satan or other deities and involve elaborate rituals, including games, setups, and ceremonies. And so, away from the horror movies, the scandalous stories, the symbols, the hoaxes, the online sensationalism. It is in fact in inner cities, in basement flats below restaurants and shops, far out of sight of everyone, where small, satanic cults will really exist.